Hi, I'm Peter Jonas, professor at Cardinal Stritch University, and I'm here to talk about a little bit of my research. And this research is actually entitled Laughing and Learning, an Alternative to Shut Up and Listen. Really, everybody teaches, and really what I'm going to talk about is teaching and how people remember things within the classroom. There's all kinds of hazards of teaching. Nowadays there's a lot more pressure than there ever was before in terms of teaching classrooms, whether it's K-12, higher education, or whatever. But what I found through research was there's a connection between humor, teaching, and learning. And let's talk about that for just a second. First of all, education is the key. You have to know what you're doing and why things work in the classroom. My research indicates that once you get people laughing, you can pretty much tell them anything. And that's an interesting question. Why is that the case? It's partially the case because there's a connection between teaching, learning, and the brain. The brain does three main things. The brain is cognitive, it's emotional, it's reflective. It's cognitive. We learn stuff. We remember stuff. Back when we were growing up and you were taught in the classroom, you remembered facts about different information. It's also reflective. You not only can learn things, you can actually remember things and you can analyze information. What's more important, though, is actually the brain is emotional. That there's a thing called emotional intelligence where you really have to be in the right mindset in order to remember stuff. You have to be comfortable. You can't be too excited and you can't be too down. You kind of have to be in that middle plane of the brain in terms of confidence and where you are and emotions to remember things. The interesting thing about memory is that when you remember things, it goes into the brain, and the brain is actually pretty smart. It knows when to dump things and it knows when to hang on to them for a long time. Like, for example, when you're teaching a class and someone says, "Is this going to be on the test?" And you immediately say, "Yes, it's on the test," so you think that students will remember it more, and the answer is actually the opposite of that. They remember it less because once the test is done, they just dump it out of their brain. The brain is made up of billions and billions of neurons, and what these neurons do is they actually connect to one another. And so one of the best ways to remember things, to teach, is that if you can connect new learning with old learning. And one of the things that works within this regard is humor. If you can tell a joke, you can then help the brain remember things. Because if the joke or the picture or the cartoon or the funny video is connected to the new material, they actually remember the new material because they connect it to the humor. So really what I want to do is I want to look at the brain for just a second. And there's a part of the brain called the amygdala. And the amygdala is really important because that is the emotional center of the brain. That is where you get excited, that's where you fall in love, that's where all the emotions of the brain are. And if you can get the amygdala acting the way that you need it to as a teacher, you can have students remember information longer. So let me give you an example of that. Here is actually a picture of the female brain. The female brain is much different than the male brain, which I'm sure you already know. So if you take a look at this picture, the reason that is funny is because it's true. It's more than partially true. It's pretty much true. I've been married 28 years. It's pretty true. Now here's a picture of the male brain. And obviously there's a contrast between the female brain. But the reason that this is funny and that you'll remember it is that it is funny. And so therefore the idea is that you'll connect this information to the information about the brain, so you're connecting new material with something that's funny, and then research tells you that you actually remember it longer and you remember it more effectively. That's how humor works in the brain and helps you remember things longer.